I knew something was wrong before I saw my daughter. The house was too warm. Not cozy warm, but sealed, breathless warm. A man beside the staircase was rubbing both temples. One of Brooke's volunteers had stopped smiling and gripped the banister as if the floor had shifted under her. The kitchen fan roared somewhere behind the walls, but the air in the foyer did not move. I had come home 3 days earlier than anyone expected. Brooke thought I was still in Newark, finishing an emergency quality audit that was supposed to keep me away until December 27th. I had pictured Piper running into my arms when I opened the door. Instead, I found her on the floor beside it, curled around herself in a torn black dress and a stained white apron. The clothes I had packed were nowhere in sight. Her cheek rested inches from the thin ribbon of icy air slipping beneath the front door. Brooke stood over her in polished leather boots. A couple entered behind me, carrying sleet on their coats and brown slush on their shoes. Brooke smiled, pressed the muddy sole of one boot onto the frayed apron covering Piper's shin, and wiped it back and forth. "Don't mind her," she told them. "That's our crazy servant." A few guests gave uncertain laughs. Piper's eyes opened, but they did not brighten when she saw me. She looked at me as if she had already used every word she owned, and none of them had worked. "Don't let her close the door," she whispered. Then I saw the carbon monoxide alarm on the wall. Its battery compartment was open. I did not scream, and I did not ask Brooke for an explanation. I stepped between her boot and my daughter and said 6 words. "Everyone outside. Call the fire department." The room fell silent. Brooke's smile disappeared first. Then the front door opened. Cold air rushed across the floor, and Piper pulled in a breath so deep it sounded painful. Before I tell you what the firefighters found inside my sister's perfect Christmas house, you need to understand that the worst thing Brooke did was not make my daughter wear that dress. It was making sure no one would believe Piper when she tried to warn them. I hope you're doing well today. Stay with me as I take you back to where this began, and please subscribe to the channel so you won't miss what happened next. 11 days earlier, on December 13th, I stood in my kitchen checking the same travel folder for the 3rd time while Piper sat on the counter, eating dry cereal from a mug. A burst pipe had closed Piper's school 3 days ahead of winter break, which should have made my sudden assignment easier. It did not. Since my husband died in 2019, I had been Piper's only legal guardian, and every overnight trip required more planning than my supervisors seemed to understand. The distribution cooperative I worked for had found irregular temperature records at a facility outside Newark. As the regional quality control specialist, I had to review the logs, inspect the process, and decide whether shipments needed to be held. The drive from Bellwether usually took about 3.5 hours, but December traffic and sleet could push it past 4. I was expected to remain there until December 27th. Brooke volunteered before I finished explaining. "She can stay with me," she said. "The house is full of people preparing for the Christmas tour. She'll barely notice you're gone." My mother, Elaine, promised to stop by regularly. That left me with no practical reason to refuse, though Piper found several personal ones. She had never liked Harlan House, a restored brick home where even the furniture seemed to be holding its breath. "If one of Brooke's mannequins moves while I'm there, I'm setting the whole place free," Piper said, swinging one sneaker against the cabinet. "They've been trapped in Victorian underwear for decades. You are not liberating the mannequins. I'll start with peaceful negotiations." That was Piper before those 12 days. She filled rooms with commentary, challenged every rule that lacked a sensible reason, and could turn my most serious warning into a debate. She was not quiet, compliant, or easy to intimidate. Remembering that version of her would later make the girl beside Brooke's front door feel even more impossible. Before we left, I gave Piper the same instructions I used when something went wrong at work. She should note when a problem started, describe exactly what she felt, and tell me what made it better or worse. I believed details protected people from assumptions. I had built my career on refusing to accuse anyone before the evidence supported it. If something feels wrong, Call me, I said as I zipped her suitcase. Tell me the time. What happened? And what changed? Piper tilted her head. You want an incident report? I want enough information to help. At home? Do I get to call you Mom? Or should I say Regional Quality Control? I laughed and pulled her into a hug. Call me anything you want, as long as you call. On the night of December 14th, she did. I was in my Newark hotel with inspection sheets spread across the bed when her name appeared on my phone. Piper's face filled the screen, pale beneath the harsh light in Brooke's small basement room. That room makes my head slow, she said. I lowered my pen. What does slow mean? Are you dizzy? I start thinking something, and then it disappears before I can finish it. Have you had water? Did you eat dinner? How long did you sleep last night? Piper frowned. I knew you were going to turn this into a questionnaire. I'm trying to separate the possibilities. Have you been on your phone all evening? Brooke's voice drifted into the call before Piper answered. She stayed awake reading half the night and barely touched breakfast. The room is fine, Dana. She just doesn't like being told to rest. Piper looked away from the screen. I feel better by the front door. The front door? When I lie near it, I can think again. The sentence unsettled me, but I did not dismiss it. I told her to go upstairs, drink water, and call immediately if she vomited, felt severely dizzy, or had trouble standing. Then I called my mother and asked her to visit the next morning, rather than later in the week. Elaine found Piper on the second floor near an open window. When she called me afterward, she said Piper looked tired but spoke normally, ate toast, and made a joke about Brooke arranging oranges by historical accuracy. She needs sleep and water, Mom said. Brooke has everything under control. That afternoon, Piper sent me another message. The house only lets me think when the door is open. I stared at it, troubled by the words, but still searching for something measurable. I typed back, tell me exactly what that means. I learned later that a carbon monoxide alarm began sounding downstairs before Piper could answer, and Brooke called her away from the phone. At the time, all I saw was the empty space beneath my message. I waited, refreshed the screen, and reminded myself that Elaine had seen Piper only hours earlier. My mother had said she was tired. Brooke had said she was safe. I told myself my daughter was surrounded by family, and that if anything were truly wrong, one of them would call me. That was what I believed on December 15th. Piper was tired, Brooke was annoyed, and my mother had seen nothing alarming. The truth was already moving in another direction, but most of what happened inside Harlan House that afternoon reached me only later, through Piper's account, Owen Pike's service report, and the call records on my phone. The carbon monoxide alarm began sounding shortly after 4. Piper told me later that it was not a faint chirp. It was a full warning that cut through the house while Brooke was arranging greenery in the dining room. Piper came upstairs with both hands over her ears and said the same thing she had tried to tell me. The room near the boiler made her head feel wrong. Brooke opened the front and back doors, shut off the boiler, and carried the alarm into the kitchen, as if distance could make it less important. She told Piper it was malfunctioning because the house was old and the device was sensitive. By the time she called a heating company, cold air had moved through the rooms for nearly an hour. Owen Pike arrived the next morning after Elaine had taken Piper to a winter break program at the public library. His report later showed that his meter did not detect a dangerous concentration at the time of inspection. The house had been aired out overnight, and the boiler was off. That did not mean he found nothing. The metal connector leading from the boiler toward the chimney had corroded around one seam. The draft test failed twice. Owen also found signs that the chimney was partially obstructed, which meant exhaust could spill back into the service corridor when the boiler ran for long periods, especially if the kitchen exhaust fan pulled air from the tightly closed house. He did not tell Brooke the boiler was definitely poisoning anyone. He told her he could not certify it as safe. According to his report, Owen shut off the gas valve, secured it with a numbered tamper-evident seal, attached a bright red tag marked "Do Not Operate," and scheduled the repair for December 18th. Before leaving, He had Brooke sign the service form, acknowledging that the system was not to be used until the venting problem had been corrected and tested. Piper returned from the library while Owen was carrying tools to his truck. She did not hear the full inspection, and Owen never discussed technical details with a 14-year-old. She saw the red tag hanging from the gas line and caught the end of Brooke's argument from the basement stairs. "I have 40 people coming through this house next week," Brooke said. Owen's answer was recorded later in his written notes. "Then you need the repair before 40 people come through." Brooke called me before Piper could. I was standing beside a loading dock in Newark, waiting for a supervisor to unlock a temperature-controlled storage room when her name appeared on my phone. "The alarm was faulty," she said immediately. "I had someone check everything. He couldn't find any carbon monoxide." I stepped away from the forklift noise. Then why did it sound? Old house, old wiring, dramatic equipment. He found a vent he wants to replace, but you know how service companies are. They turn every visit into a sales opportunity. "Is the boiler off?" I asked. "Yes, and it stays off until he repairs it." Brooke gave a small laugh. "Dana, I know how to maintain my own house. That isn't what I asked." There was a pause before she said, "Yes, it stays off." I should have called Owen's company myself. I should have asked for the wording on the tag instead of accepting Brooke's summary. At the time, I had no reason to think she would lie about a sealed gas valve with my daughter sleeping 20 feet away. I treated her promise like a control already in place. On December 17th, Brooke canceled the repair appointment. The company's scheduling record later showed she claimed a family emergency and said she would call after Christmas. She did not tell me, my mother, or anyone helping with the holiday tour. The temperature dropped sharply overnight. By the morning of the 18th, frost covered the inside corners of the old windows, and the portable heaters Brooke had placed upstairs could not warm the whole house. Piper remembered Brooke standing in the basement in a wool coat, staring at the red tag as if it had personally humiliated her. Brooke cut the numbered seal, removed the red tag, opened the gas valve, and restarted the boiler. Piper did not see her touch the valve. She heard the pipes begin knocking while she was carrying folded table linens downstairs. When she reached the service corridor, the red tag was gone. She found it later in the kitchen trash beneath coffee grounds and clipped evergreen branches. Piper pulled out her phone and tried to photograph it. The image she managed to save showed only one corner of the red paper, part of the black lettering, and the time on the screen reflected in the metal trash lid. Before Brooke entered, the phone had already pushed that single image into the family cloud account linked to mine. Brooke entered before Piper could take another. "What are you doing?" Piper said she wanted to send me the picture. Brooke took the phone from her hand. Piper told me later that she did not grab or shout. Brooke simply held out her palm and waited until refusing. Felt like creating a larger danger than surrendering it. "You misunderstood what you heard," Brooke said. "Your mother is trying to keep food from being shipped to thousands of people. She does not need you manufacturing emergencies because you dislike a room." The tag said not to use it. The tag said a company wanted money. Brooke kept the phone. That evening she called me and said Piper had dropped it on the stone floor outside. The screen was supposedly shattered, and a replacement would not arrive for several days. She offered to let Piper call from her phone, presenting the arrangement as proof that nothing had changed. The video connected from an upstairs guest room. A window stood open behind Piper, and the cold had put some color back into her face. She looked tired but more alert than she had during our first call. Brooke was not visible, though I could hear a drawer opening somewhere nearby. "How did you break your phone?" I asked. Piper's eyes moved toward the edge of the screen. "It happened near the red paper." "What red paper?" "Aunt Brooke fixed the red paper." I waited for more, but Piper pressed her lips together. At work, vague answers meant I kept asking until the sequence made sense. "Fixed it, how?" Brooke's voice came from outside the frame. "She means the service tag. The technician left litter hanging from my equipment after confirming there was no leak." I looked back at Piper. Is that what you mean? She gave a small nod that did not reach her eyes. The open window rattled in a gust. Piper turned toward it and took a breath before saying, "It's warmer downstairs again." Brooke stepped close enough that one shoulder entered the picture. "And she is overtired. We have been through this all day. I want to speak to her alone." "You are speaking to her. I mean, without you listening." Brooke's expression stayed pleasant. "My phone is the only one available, and I'm not leaving it in a room with a child who already destroyed one." Piper stared at the screen. I could see a question in her face, but I did what I had always done. I waited for her to put it into words. She never did. "She needs to rest," Brooke said, and the call ended before I could object. I sent a message asking her to arrange a private call with Piper the next morning. Brooke replied 20 minutes later. The replacement phone had not arrived. She would let me know when it did. Brooke never arranged the private call she promised. Instead, beginning on December 19th, she put Piper on speaker for a few minutes each evening and stood close enough to hear every word. I did not know that then. All I knew was that Piper always appeared upstairs, usually near the same tall window, with Brooke's phone propped against a lamp and cold light behind her. The first night, I asked whether her headache had improved. "A little," Piper said. "Any nausea? Dizziness? Trouble standing?" Her eyes moved past the screen. "I'm okay." Brooke's voice came from nearby. "She ate dinner, she showered, and she has been talking normally. She is tired because she keeps convincing herself something is wrong." The call lasted 4 minutes. The next one lasted 3. Piper never had the phone in her hand, and whenever I asked a question that required more than yes or no, Brooke answered first or found a reason to end the conversation. I called my mother separately on December 20th. Elaine had visited that afternoon and found Piper upstairs folding place cards beside an open window. She admitted Piper looked pale, but said she had eaten soup and corrected the spelling on 3 historical display cards. "She is talking and walking," Mom told me. "Brooke says she barely slept again." "Did you see the room she is using?" "No. Brooke has supplies stacked everywhere downstairs. I offered to take Piper home with me, but Brooke put her on speaker, and Piper said she wanted to stay until you finished." Brooke also sent a 30-second video of Piper eating soup beside the open upstairs window. It looked spontaneous, though I learned later that Brooke had chosen the room and the few minutes when fresh air made Piper appear most like herself. I sat in my rental car, with the route home open on the dashboard. Piper had not vomited or fainted. Elaine had seen her eat and walk. Piper had declined Mom's offer to leave, and Brooke had shown me a coherent child beside an open window. I still believed the boiler had been checked and left off. What I did not understand was that Brooke was bringing her upstairs before those calls, letting her sit beside an open window until the color returned to her face. Afterward, Piper was sent back to the small room beside the service corridor, where the headache returned and her thoughts began slipping apart again. Piper later told me she tried to explain the alarm to Elaine. She said it had sounded before Owen came, and the red tag had disappeared after he left. Elaine asked Brooke about it. Brooke said Owen had measured the air and found nothing. She called the red tag a routine service notice and said Piper had misunderstood adult conversations. Elaine accepted the explanation because it sounded calm, and calm had always carried more authority in our family than fear. By then, Brooke had begun using a new phrase, health anxiety. She told Elaine, Marla Quinn, and the other volunteers that Piper had become fixated on the alarm, that I knew, and that a nurse line had advised us not to reinforce her fears. No record of such a call was ever found. Brooke did not tell anyone to ignore an unconscious child or refuse to call 911. She was more careful than that. She said that if Piper mentioned gas, alarms, or feeling poisoned, they should bring her directly to Brooke, so Brooke could call me. To Marla, a teacher who believed a parent and a medical professional had already made a plan, the instruction sounded responsible. That was how Brooke turned a warning into a diagnosis. Every time Piper tried to describe the house, her words became evidence that she was obsessed with describing the house. The final piece of Brooke's Christmas program changed on December 21st, when the woman hired to portray a Victorian maid canceled because her own child had the flu. Brooke had planned to station the performer in the foyer to collect coats, offer towels for wet shoes, and help guide guests through the first-floor rooms. She decided Piper would replace her. The costume came from a storage chest in the attic. It was a black dress with a split seam near one cuff and a hem worn thin from years of use. The white apron was stained yellow at the waist and torn along one side. Piper laughed when Brooke first held it up because she thought it had to be a joke. "I'm not wearing that." "You have spent a week disrupting this house," Brooke said. "You can contribute for one evening." "I'm not your employee." "No. Employees are paid to cooperate." Piper went upstairs to change into her own clothes. Brooke had already locked the suitcase inside a linen closet and put the key in her pocket. She called it costume discipline. When Piper threatened to tell me, Brooke reminded her that my audit involved food being shipped to thousands of people. She said one false emergency could force me to abandon the inspection, embarrass my company, and possibly cost me the job that paid for our house. Piper knew enough to understand that Brooke was manipulating her. Under normal circumstances, she would have argued until one of them ran out of breath. But she was no longer operating under normal circumstances. Her head hurt. Her legs felt unreliable, and every attempt to explain the problem had ended with an adult calmly renaming it. On December 22nd, Piper found a landline in Brooke's office. A safety sheet for the Christmas tour lay beside it with the local fire department's non-emergency number printed at the bottom. She had entered the first few digits when Brooke walked in and pressed the receiver down. The call never connected because Brooke stopped her before anyone answered. "If you call them over an alarm that has already been checked," Brooke said, "your mother will have to leave Newark. If she loses that contract, you can explain why." Piper told me later that this was when she stopped trying to sound convincing. She was protecting me with a mind too impaired to test whether Brooke's threat made sense. Walking away was not realistic. Harlan House sat more than a mile from the nearest occupied home. Ice covered the road. Brooke had locked away Piper's coat, and crossing the foyer made her legs unreliable. When volunteers arrived, Brooke kept her within sight and had already taught them to return her if she mentioned gas or alarms. During our call that night, I asked why she was so quiet. "I'm just tired. Do you want me to come home?" For 1 second, Piper looked directly into the camera. Then Brooke shifted somewhere beyond the frame. "No," Piper said. "Finish your work." I heard the words and believed they were a decision. I did not hear the fear that had been placed behind them. On December 23rd, the boiler had been running for hours while volunteers cooked in the kitchen and tested the exhaust fans. The carbon monoxide alarm sounded for the second time. According to Piper, Marla, and the device recovered later, Brooke opened the wall-mounted alarm, removed its batteries, and waited for the warning to stop. Then she snapped the dead unit back onto its mounting plate so the foyer would still appear compliant during the tour. At 10:14 that night, she emailed the volunteers. The message said Piper was experiencing a health fixation related to gas and alarms. It instructed them not to argue with her or reinforce the fixation, and to direct any concern to Brooke. It did not tell them to ignore visible medical distress. It did something more useful to Brooke. It taught them how to interpret Piper before they saw her. Piper lay down beside the front door after everyone went upstairs. Cold air slipped beneath the threshold and moved across her face. She tried counting her breaths because counting usually helped when she felt overwhelmed. At 10, she lost track and started again. The next time, she could not remember whether she had reached 7 or 3. Brooke found her there with the black dress folded over one arm. "Tomorrow," she said, "you smile, you serve, and you stop trying to frighten people." Piper closed her eyes beside the only strip of air that still let her think. By 3 o'clock on Christmas Eve, the last corrective action at the Newark facility had been signed. The remaining review would be handled by the local team after the holiday. My supervisor told me I could leave, and for the first time in 11 days, I let myself imagine Piper's face when I walked through Brooke's door without warning. I did not call ahead. I wanted one good surprise after a week of short, careful conversations in which my daughter had sounded less like herself each night. The drive should have taken 3.5 hours. Sleep began before I reached the Pennsylvania line, and traffic crawled around 2 separate accidents. By the time I turned onto Brooks Road, I had been driving for 4 hours and 15 minutes. It was after 7. Cars lined both sides of the property, their roofs dusted white beneath the porch lights. Brooke had divided the Christmas tour into 3 groups, 42 guests across the evening. About 18 people were inside when I arrived. Through the front windows, I saw candlelight, evergreen garlands, and women in formal coats holding glasses beneath the staircase. It looked exactly like the evening Brooke had spent months promising everyone. The first thing that felt wrong was the heat. It pressed against me the moment the door opened, thick enough to make my skin tighten. The second was the way people were moving. A man beside the staircase rubbed both temples. Marla Quinn held the banister with one hand while speaking to a guest, as if she needed it for balance. An older man loosened his tie and asked no one in particular for water. No one was collapsing. Nothing looked dramatic enough to force the room to stop pretending. The string quartet recording continued beneath the conversations, and volunteers kept directing guests toward the parlor. I searched for Piper. She was on the floor less than 6 feet from me. For one stunned second, I did not recognize the shape curled beside the door as my daughter. She wore a black dress that hung badly from her shoulders and gathered around her legs in frayed folds. A stained white apron covered the front. One cuff had split open, and the hem was dark with old dirt and fresh mud. Her hair was tangled against her cheek. The sweaters, jeans, and red Christmas dress I had packed were nowhere in sight. Her face rested near the narrow stream of cold air, slipping beneath the threshold. "Piper?" I called, but she did not answer. A couple entered behind me carrying sleet on their coats and brown slush on their shoes. Brooke appeared from the parlor in a fitted green dress and polished leather boots, smiling as if I were simply another guest who had arrived at an inconvenient moment. "Dana," she said, "you weren't supposed to be back." Before I could reach Piper, Brooke touched the toe of her boot to my daughter's side. "Up," she said quietly. "Guests are coming in." Piper stirred but did not rise. The apron had fallen across one shin. Brooke placed the muddy sole of her boot onto the fabric covering Piper's leg and rubbed it back and forth, leaving a wet brown streak across the white cloth and the frayed black hem beneath it. She looked at the couple and smiled. "Don't mind her. That's our crazy servant." A few people nearby gave uncertain laughs. They were not laughing because what they saw was harmless. They were laughing because Brooke had already given them a way to understand it. To them, Piper was a difficult teenager, performing a historical role, and Brooke was the capable hostess managing the disruption. I stepped between Brooke and my daughter. Piper's eyelids lifted slowly. Her eyes found mine, but there was no surprise in them, only exhaustion. "Don't let her close the door," she whispered. The words pulled my attention to the wall. A carbon monoxide alarm hung near the basement corridor. Its battery compartment was open. I did not know the concentration in the house. I did not know whether the boiler, the chimney, or something else was responsible. I only knew I was looking at several people with the same kind of symptoms, inside a sealed, overheated building, with a disabled safety device and a child lying where outside air entered. At work, 3 separate anomalies were enough to stop an entire production line. I had spent 11 days asking my daughter to give me clearer evidence. Standing over her, I finally understood that I already had enough to stop everything. I raised my voice, but I did not scream. "Everyone outside, call the fire department." The room fell silent. Brooke stared at me. "You cannot be serious." I pulled the front door fully open. Cold air swept over the floor and lifted the edge of Piper's apron. "Marla, call 911, I said. "Tell them we may have carbon monoxide exposure. Everyone else needs to leave now. Marla looked from me to the alarm. Whatever Brooke had told her before the party no longer held against the sight of Piper on the floor. She took out her phone and began speaking to the dispatcher before she reached the porch. Brooke moved toward the door. Dana, you are creating panic over a broken alarm. Owen checked this house. Outside, I said. You can explain it to the fire department. The older man who had asked for water helped clear a path. The couple who had entered behind me knelt when I tried to lift Piper. Between the three of us, we brought her upright. Her knees buckled immediately, and her full weight sagged against my shoulder. I've got you, I told her. Piper tried to take one step, then another. By the time we reached the porch, she was shaking from effort. The cold did not hurt her. Standing had taken what little strength she still had. Guests gathered along the driveway and lawn, some without coats, while volunteers counted names from the tour list. Marla remained on the phone until the first engine turned onto the road. Firefighters entered wearing breathing equipment and carrying meters. Even with the front door open, the first device began alarming inside the foyer. The readings rose as they moved toward the basement corridor. One firefighter ordered the gas supply shut down, while another opened additional doors and windows and started ventilation. Paramedics placed an oxygen mask over Piper's face. She was conscious, but slow to answer. When they asked how long she had felt sick, she looked at me as if the question required more pieces than she could hold. Days, I said, then stopped myself. She has been complaining for days. She needs to tell you the rest when she can. The firefighter examining the wall alarm photographed it before removing it. He turned it over, checked the empty battery compartment, and asked the room behind him, "Who took the batteries out of this unit?" Brooke stood on the walkway, wrapped in someone else's coat. Her eyes shifted toward Piper. "She has been obsessed with that alarm all week," she said. She had been asked who removed the batteries. Instead of answering, she defined my daughter again. That was the pattern I had missed. Brooke did not need to disprove what Piper said. She only needed to tell everyone what kind of person was saying it. The paramedics guided Piper toward the ambulance. She tried to walk, but after 2 steps, her legs weakened again, and they lifted her onto the stretcher. I climbed in beside her while a firefighter asked Brooke to remain on the property for questions. Inside, the doors closed against the flashing lights and the voices outside. Piper's fingers moved beneath the blanket until I took her hand. Her eyes stayed on the oxygen mask for several seconds before she turned toward me. "I told both of you," she said. The words did not choose between Brooke and me. They did not need to. The paramedics kept oxygen over Piper's face, all the way to the hospital. Her answers came slowly, sometimes after the question had already been repeated. She knew her name and knew I was beside her, but when one of them asked what day it was, she stared at the ceiling as if the answer had slipped somewhere she could not reach. In the emergency department, the staff moved quickly, without making the room feel frantic. They checked her blood, heart rhythm, oxygen needs, balance, and mental status. The doctor explained that carbon monoxide could cause headache, nausea, dizziness, weakness, and confusion, especially after repeated exposure. He did not promise that a few minutes of fresh air would erase what had happened. Piper needed oxygen, observation, and time. I sat beside her bed through Christmas night, watching the mask rise and fall over her face. Each time she opened her eyes, I wanted to ask how Brooke had taken her phone, why her suitcase had been locked, and how long she had been sleeping near the door. I wanted enough detail to build the sequence I had failed to see. For once, I did not ask. A nurse brought me coffee shortly before midnight. Marla had sent a message saying she and several guests had gone to be evaluated after developing headaches or nausea. She did not give me anyone's medical results, and the hospital did not discuss them with me. I only knew what those people chose to share themselves. Brooke sent her first message while Piper was still receiving oxygen. This was an equipment malfunction. Piper removed those batteries because she had been fixated on the alarm all week. Do not turn this into something it was not. I saved a screenshot and forwarded it to the fire investigator instead of giving Brooke the public argument she wanted. The next morning, he explained that mixed fingerprints on a household alarm could not identify who removed the batteries. The device, heating system, service records, and witness accounts would have to form the answer together. His caution sounded like the language I used at work, except Piper had already paid for everyone else's patience. She woke more fully that afternoon. The color in her face had improved, but she still looked exhausted, and the doctor warned me that difficulty concentrating and headaches could continue. I asked whether she wanted the lights dimmed. She nodded. For several minutes, we listened to the quiet machinery around her. Then Piper said, "You kept asking me to prove what the room did to my head." I turned toward her. I couldn't use my head in that room. There was no accusation in her voice. That made it worse. She sounded as if she were explaining a fact I should have understood on my own. "I know," I said. Her eyes moved away from me. "You didn't know. I should have understood that you were asking me to check, not asking me to agree with a diagnosis." My throat tightened, but I did not make her comfort me. I kept demanding clearer words when the danger was taking those words away from you. "I am sorry." I almost added that Brooke had lied to me. I almost reminded her that Elaine had seen her and believed she was safe. Both things were true, but neither belonged inside my apology. Piper was quiet long enough that I thought she might be too tired to continue. Then she said, "My phone isn't broken." I waited without questioning her until she continued. "Aunt Brooke took it when I tried to take a picture of the red tag. She made me call you from her phone, and she stayed close enough to hear." The details came in pieces. Brooke had locked the suitcase because Piper refused the costume. She had told Piper that making me leave Newark could cost me my job. Piper had tried to call the fire department number on the event sheet, but Brooke had pushed down the receiver before the call connected. When Piper lost her place, or closed her eyes, I did not pull her back to the beginning. I wrote down only what she chose to say, with the time and date, then asked whether she wanted to stop. Twice she said yes. The second time, I closed the notebook and did not reopen it that day. On December 26th, the fire investigator contacted Pike Heating and Air directly. Owen Pike provided the service report, photographs of the shutoff valve with its numbered lockout seal and red warning tag, and the scheduling record showing Brooke had canceled the repair planned for December 18th. I did not receive the originals. They stayed with the investigation. A victim services advocate later helped me obtain copies I was legally allowed to review. The report was plain and brief. Owen had found unsafe venting conditions, shut off the boiler, sealed the valve, attached a do not operate tag, and advised that the system remain off until repairs and testing were completed. A photograph showed the red tag hanging exactly where Piper had said it was. The cloud backup held one blurry image of red paper and part of the word operate. Its December 18th metadata did not prove the case, but it confirmed Piper had seen a real warning after Brooke claimed the problem was resolved. By then, local code enforcement had posted a notice at Harlan House. Brooke could live there only under whatever safety conditions the authorities imposed, but the property could not be used for tours, parties, or public occupancy until the heating system was repaired and the building passed inspection. That decision came from the county, not the Preservation Society Brooke had spent years trying to impress. The investigator arranged for Owen to speak with me briefly through the advocate. I thanked him for keeping records. "I wish I had known a child was sleeping down there," he said. "You shut the system off." "I shut that boiler down and sealed the valve," Owen replied. "Someone cut the seal and opened it again." After the call, I looked through the glass wall of Piper's hospital room. She was asleep beneath a clean blanket, her own clothes folded on the chair beside her. For the first time, I understood that what happened at Harlan House had not been one terrible Christmas mistake. Someone had been warned, stopped, and given time to choose differently. Then that person had chosen to turn the danger back on. Until then, I had been trying to understand how Brooke had hidden a dangerous boiler. What I had not yet understood was that she had also built a second kind of protection around it. She had prepared everyone in the house to distrust the one person most likely to expose her. After Piper came home, I turned Brooke's messages, my call history, Piper's cloud-synced photograph, and my notes over to the fire investigator. I left the witnesses alone, so each person could speak before Brooke shaped another shared version. Piper spent most of the first week of January sleeping. She could eat and walk around the apartment, but concentration exhausted her quickly. Sometimes, she stopped in the middle of a sentence and stared at the floor until the missing thought returned. Each time it happened, I remembered asking her to explain precisely what the room was doing to her mind. A victim services advocate helped me find a trauma counselor and guided us through the county safety assessment. On January 3rd, Children and Youth Services barred Brooke from contacting Piper during the investigation and prohibited Elaine from carrying messages between them. Brooke responded by posting a carefully written statement online. She called the incident a mechanical failure in an old house. She said Piper had become distressed after hearing an alarm and that I was using a family disagreement to destroy a small business. She thanked the guests who had remained calm despite unnecessary panic. She did not mention the red tag, the locked suitcase, the missing phone, or the muddy mark she had rubbed across Piper's clothes. I read the statement once. My first impulse was to answer every sentence. Instead, I sent it to my attorney and closed the page. Brooke wanted a public argument, because public arguments could be reframed as two emotional sisters attacking each other. The evidence did not need my anger to become true. 2 days later, Marla Quinn called. Her voice sounded different from the confident tone I remembered in Brooke's foyer. She asked whether Piper was awake, then immediately corrected herself. I'm sorry. That isn't information you owe me. She's recovering, I said. What did you need to tell me? Marla asked to meet with the investigator rather than speak only to me. We arranged a conversation at the county office, with the investigator and my advocate present. I sat across from her at a plain table while she kept both hands wrapped around a paper cup she never drank from. Brooke told us Piper had health anxiety, she said. She said you knew, and that you had spoken to a nurse line. Did she say when I supposedly made that call? No, I never asked. Marla looked down at the cup. She explained that Brooke had briefed the volunteers before the Christmas tour. If Piper mentioned gas, alarms, poisoning, or feeling sick, they were supposed to take her to Brooke. Brooke said arguing would reinforce the fixation, and calling me repeatedly would interfere with my work. She made it sound like a care plan, Marla said. Like the adults responsible for Piper had already agreed on it. Did Brooke ever tell you not to call 911 if Piper lost consciousness or appeared seriously ill? No, nothing that direct. Marla swallowed. If she had said that, I would have known it was wrong. But you saw Piper struggling. I saw her stumble near the staircase. I asked if she needed to sit down. Brooke said she had just spoken to you and Piper had been checked. She told me Piper became more dramatic when people showed concern. Marla finally looked at me. I wanted the explanation to be true because accepting it meant I did not have to challenge the woman hosting the event. Her admission did not make me feel generous. It made me think of Piper surrounded by educated adults who had mistaken Brooke's confidence for authority. Did Piper say the house was making her sick? Yes. I brought her straight back to Brooke, instead of checking. Marla's eyes filled, but she did not ask me to comfort her. She gave the investigator the email Brooke had sent at 10:14 on December 23rd. The subject line read, "Volunteer guidance for Christmas Heritage Evening." Most of it covered parking, coats, room capacity, and the order of the tour. Near the bottom was a section labeled Family Accommodation. Piper was described as experiencing a health fixation related to gas and alarms. Volunteers were instructed not to debate, reassure, or reinforce her claims. Any concern was to be brought directly to Brooke, who would contact Piper's mother if necessary. The email had been sent before the Christmas event began, before Brooke later claimed Piper had created panic in front of guests. Brooke had not invented the accusation after firefighters arrived. She had prepared it in advance. Another volunteer gave a separate statement the following day. She remembered Piper asking to borrow her phone. Brooke intervened and said Piper had lost device privileges after damaging her own phone. The volunteer accepted that explanation and walked away. Elaine also provided a supplemental statement. She admitted Brooke had locked Piper's suitcase inside the linen closet because Piper refused to wear the maid costume. My mother still used soft language, saying she believed Brooke was trying to prevent a teenage argument from disrupting the event. She was not yet ready to call it what it was. "Did you know Piper's phone was not broken?" I asked her later. "No, and I never asked to see it." Elaine's silence after the admission said more than an explanation could have. "I believed Brooke," she said. "You believed the person controlling every source of information. I thought she was helping. You saw Piper without her clothes, without her phone, and looking sick. You decided Brooke's explanation mattered more than what was in front of you." Mom began to cry. I ended the call before the conversation turned into another request for me to relieve her guilt. By mid-January, the separate records formed one sequence. Brooke had been warned, canceled the repair, controlled Piper's phone and clothes, and instructed adults how to interpret her before she spoke. She had turned a warning into a symptom because one curious adult could have ended the tour. The phrase, "crazy servant," was not merely an insult Brooke invented for a laugh. It was the public conclusion of a story she had been telling for days. That evening, Piper was asleep on the couch while I reviewed the copy of the volunteer email my attorney had obtained. My eyes stopped on one sentence near the bottom. "Please do not reinforce Piper's fixation on gas or alarms." I read it again and understood why my daughter's voice had failed inside that house. Brooke had made sure that before Piper opened her mouth, everyone had already been told what not to hear. By the time Piper came home, the Christmas decorations in our apartment had begun to look like objects from someone else's life. I had left a box of ornaments open on the dining table before driving to Newark. It was still there when I brought her back, untouched beneath a thin layer of dust. She was better than she had been in the hospital, but better was not the same as recovered. Some mornings she woke with a headache behind her eyes. Concentrating for more than 20 minutes exhausted her. She could walk normally through the apartment, then stop in the middle of the hallway because she had forgotten why she entered it. I learned not to finish her sentences. The fire investigator called during the second week of January. Piper was asleep on the couch, so I stepped into the kitchen and kept my voice low. He said the examination of Harlan House supported a backdraft from the old boiler system. The damaged vent connection and partially blocked chimney had allowed exhaust to spill toward the service corridor when the boiler ran for long periods. The commercial kitchen fan had increased the pressure problem, while Brooke kept the house sealed against the cold. The investigators could not reconstruct an exact carbon monoxide level for every hour Piper had spent there. The front door had been opened before firefighters arrived, and the building had been ventilated during the response. What they could establish was the source, the path the exhaust had taken, and why Piper's small room had placed her at greater risk than the upstairs bedrooms. Then he mentioned the front door. The gap beneath the old threshold allowed outside air to enter the foyer. It did not make the floor safe, and he warned me not to describe it that way. It meant only that the air near Piper's face may have been less contaminated than the air beside the service corridor. After the call, I sat across from Piper at the coffee table. She had been sorting pieces of a puzzle, but had stopped with one blue piece between her fingers. "The investigators figured out why you kept going to the door," I said. She looked at me cautiously. "Because Brooke made me work there? That put you near it. It isn't why you stayed on the floor." I explained the draft in the simplest terms I could. The air entering beneath the door had been cleaner than the air near the room where she slept. Her body had noticed the difference before any adult bothered to check it. Piper turned the puzzle piece over in her hand. It was the only place where my thoughts stayed in order. The sentence hurt more than anything in Owen's report. Piper had not curled beside the door because Brooke had trained her to accept the role of a servant. She had not chosen the floor because she believed she belonged beneath everyone else. She had gone there because every time cold air touched her face, the world stopped sliding away for a little while. "You were trying to keep yourself conscious," I said. "I was trying to remember what I was trying to do." Her voice remained calm, but her fingers tightened around the cardboard piece. I thought of every question I had asked from Newark. Had she eaten? Was she dizzy? What exactly did slow mean? Each one had sounded reasonable to me. "I turned every warning into an interview," I said. "You told me something felt wrong, and I made you prove that your description was accurate before I acted." Piper placed the puzzle piece on the table, without fitting it anywhere. "I knew what you would say before you said it." "What did you think I would say?" "Are you sure?" I closed my eyes for a moment. She had not stopped calling because Brooke's threats were perfect. She had stopped because Brooke had built those threats on something Piper already believed about me. "I thought asking that made me fair," I said. "It made me feel like being unsure meant I should be quiet." There was no defense I could offer that would not ask her to carry my intentions instead of her experience. I moved my chair closer, but I did not touch her until she leaned toward me first. "If you say something feels unsafe, we check first," I said. Piper studied my face as if she expected a condition to follow. "What if we check, and nothing is wrong? Then we lose time. We do not lose you." Her mouth trembled once. She looked down before the emotion could fully reach her face, then pushed the blue puzzle piece toward me. "It goes in the window," she said. We found the space together. My mother called that afternoon. Elaine had been leaving messages every few days, each one careful and shorter than the last. She no longer said Brooke had meant well. She no longer asked me to remember that we were family. This time, she asked whether Piper would agree to see her. "I'm not deciding for her," I said. "I only want to apologize." "Then you can ask, and she can say no." When I told Piper, she was sitting at the kitchen counter eating soup. "Not yet," she said without needing time to consider it. I texted Elaine those 2 words as part of a full sentence, telling her Piper was not ready and that I would not raise the subject again unless Piper chose to. Mom replied that she understood. Elaine's supplemental statement admitted she saw the locked suitcase and heard Brooke call Piper dramatic. She did not invent knowledge of the alarm to make herself look braver. I told Piper only what had been confirmed, and did not turn honesty into a demand for forgiveness. Later that week, the Bellwether Historical Preservation Society sent separate requests to every volunteer who had worked at Harlan House on Christmas Eve. They were instructed not to discuss their recollections with one another, and to submit individual accounts of what they had seen, heard, and been told before the event. The request broke Brooke's polished story into private recollections. Marla had seen Piper stumble. Another volunteer had seen the phone refused. Elaine knew about the suitcase, and guests had watched the boot. Brooke had depended on each witness, believing one small piece did not matter. That evening, Piper and I sat near the living room window while snow gathered on the fire escape. She had managed nearly 30 minutes of schoolwork before the words began blurring together, and we had stopped without treating the break like failure. "Can adults tell the truth and still be good people?" she asked. I knew she was not asking only about Elaine or Marla. She was asking about me. Only if they stopped protecting the version of themselves that did nothing. Piper rested her head against my shoulder. Outside, the snow softened the city sounds, but inside our apartment, the truth was no longer quiet because Brooke had ordered it to be. It was beginning to separate from the story she had built around it. On February 14th, the Bellwether Historical Preservation Society reviewed Brooke's conduct in the same library room where she had lectured for years about stewardship and responsibility. Piper did not attend. No one had the right to make her sit in a room full of adults and prove again that she had suffered. She stayed home with a trusted neighbor, working on a history assignment in 20-minute intervals. When I left, she asked only one question. "Can they make Brooke stay away from me?" "The society cannot," I told her. They can decide whether she represents them. The county safety plan still keeps her from contacting you, and anything longer belongs to the court. Piper nodded. Then don't let them pretend this is the whole consequence. My victim services advocate sat beside me at the hearing. Across the room, Brooke occupied a table with her attorney. Elaine sat several rows behind us. She had not asked to speak to Piper, had not brought a letter, and had not whispered that family should forgive family. She kept her hands folded in her lap and looked at the floor whenever Brooke turned toward her. The society president limited the hearing to Brooke's office, membership, and the house's place in its programs. Criminal charges and public occupancy restrictions belong to the prosecutor and county code officials. Brooke leaned toward her attorney, as if the distinction proved the hearing did not matter. It mattered to her more than anything else in the room. The society was the audience she had built her life around. Owen described the failed draft test, corroded vent, sealed valve, and red tag. Brooke's attorney emphasized that he had measured no CO after the how. I did not certify the system as safe, Owen replied. I shut it down and sealed the valve because it was unsafe to operate. Brooke reacted as if caution were incompetence. The municipal code officer read a public safety summary. Firefighters had detected elevated carbon monoxide. Owen's numbered seal had been cut. The valve was open, the red tag was gone, and the alarm contained no batteries. The report did not name who removed them, but it showed that several safety barriers had been reversed before the tour. A board member looked at Brooke. After Owen sealed the valve and tagged the boiler, who authorized it to run again? The house became dangerously cold, Brooke replied. I believed the system had been shut down out of excessive caution. Owen found no gas in the air. That was not the question. I made a judgment as the property owner. Her attorney touched her arm, but Brooke continued. There were portable heaters running. Pipes could have frozen. I had obligations to the property. She spoke about the house, as if it had been the vulnerable person in her care. Marla's voice shook when she took her seat before the board. She described the instructions Brooke had given the volunteers, and admitted she had accepted them because Brooke said Dana and a nurse line had already addressed Piper's fears. I saw Piper lose her balance, Marla said. I asked if she needed help. Brooke said concern would reinforce the behavior. I believed the adult who sounded certain, instead of checking the child who looked sick. Brooke turned toward the board. Marla is protecting herself now. She was responsible for volunteer safety that night. Marla did not argue. I am responsible for what I failed to do. That does not make Brooke's instructions untrue. Another volunteer confirmed Brooke had stopped Piper from borrowing a phone. Elaine's statement acknowledged Piper's pallor, the locked suitcase, and Brooke's description of the costume as discipline. Brooke dismissed both accounts as disloyal or unreliable. Neither witness argued back. A married couple who attended the tour described entering through the front door and seeing Piper on the floor. The wife's voice tightened when she explained how Brooke pressed a muddy boot against the fabric covering Piper's shin. We thought it was part of the performance for perhaps 2 seconds, she said. Then the child opened her eyes. Brooke interrupted. I touched the costume, not her body. She was refusing to stand while guests were arriving. The room changed at that sentence. Brooke did not deny the humiliation. She tried to reduce it to a technical distinction. The president warned her not to interrupt again. Finally, the board displayed the volunteer email, sent at 10:14 on December 23rd. It named Piper's supposed fixation on gas and alarms before the public event began. It instructed volunteers to direct every concern back to Brooke. One member read the section twice, then looked over his glasses. Why did your volunteer instructions mention Piper's fear of gas before the event began? Because she had been obsessing over it for days, Brooke said. That is exactly what I have been trying to explain. The board member waited. Brooke continued, her voice becoming sharper. She heard a faulty alarm, misunderstood a contractor, and decided the house was poisoning her. Dana encouraged it by questioning every decision I made. Piper had been hospitalized after prolonged exposure. Firefighters had measured carbon monoxide inside the house. Owen had locked out the boiler. Yet Brooke still spoke as if the central problem was that Piper had noticed. That was the flaw she could not overcome. Every chance she had to acknowledge danger became another opportunity to attack the child who named it. During the 20-minute recess, people sat with what they had witnessed and the explanations they had accepted. When the board returned, the vote was unanimous. Brooke was removed from her leadership position, her membership was terminated, and Harlan House was excluded indefinitely from every program sponsored by the society. The president reminded everyone that the ruling did not decide criminal guilt and did not replace the county's code order. No one applauded. Outside the meeting room, Marla stopped beside me. "I am sorry," she said. "Not because I was deceived, because I saw enough to check, and I chose not to." "I'll tell Piper you said that if she asks," I replied. "I won't ask her to make you feel forgiven." Marla nodded. "That's fair." Elaine approached, but stopped several feet away. She said only that she understood Piper was not ready to see her. Then she left, without asking me to change that answer. Brooke caught me near the elevator. Her attorney was speaking with someone behind her, and for the first time that morning, she had no board, guests, or volunteers arranged around her. "You took one bad night and destroyed my life," she said. "No. You built your life on making her unbelievable." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside before Brooke could turn the hallway into another stage. My advocate confirmed the prosecutor was still reviewing the case. The hearing offered no instant arrest or sentence. The law would move on evidence and time. As the elevator descended, I remembered Piper's warning not to mistake this for the whole consequence. It was simply the first place where Brooke could no longer decide what everyone else saw. By September, the legal process had lasted longer than Brooke's public sympathy. After a March summons and months of preliminary proceedings, she accepted a plea on a charge related to endangering the welfare of a child. The agreement resolved the criminal case, without erasing the county code violations or other consequences attached to Harlan House. At sentencing in October, the judge imposed probation, community service, and a counseling program focused on accountability. Brooke was ordered to have no contact with Piper and was prohibited from taking unsupervised responsibility for another minor during probation. The order did not ban her from every child forever. It did not strip her of every possession or reduce her to the exaggerated punishment people often imagine when they want justice to feel immediate. It did something more relevant. It removed her access to my daughter. I attended the sentencing, but Piper did not. She had spent enough time being discussed by adults who expected her presence to make their decisions feel meaningful. I gave her the outcome in plain language that evening and let her decide what questions she wanted answered. "Did she say she was sorry?" Piper asked. "No. She did not ask how you were either." Piper nodded as though that confirmed something she no longer needed to debate. Harlan House remained under restrictions from code enforcement. Brooke could not host tours, workshops, or public gatherings until the heating system, ventilation, alarms, and occupancy requirements passed inspection. Even if the house reopened someday, it would no longer appear in the Preservation Society's programs. The organization had removed the sign bearing Brooke's name months earlier. What remained inside the house belonged to a private life that no longer had an audience. Piper's suitcase and phone were still there. Through our attorneys, Brooke agreed that I could retrieve them with a victim services representative present. Piper did not want to return. Before I left, I asked whether there was anything else she wanted me to bring home. "My red sweater," she said, "the one Dad gave me." When I asked if she wanted anything else, she looked toward the window. Not the dress. I knew exactly which dress she meant. Harlan House looked smaller when I returned. Without evergreen garlands, rented lights, and guests filling the driveway, it was simply an old brick building behind bare trees. The historical tour plaque had been removed from the front gate, leaving 4 pale holes in the wood where the screws had been. Brooke opened the door before the representative could knock twice. The house was cold. The boiler system had been removed, and the temporary heat kept only a few rooms warm enough to prevent damage. Our footsteps carried through the empty foyer, where music and uncertain laughter had once covered Piper's breathing. Brooke wore gray trousers and a cream blouse. She looked carefully composed, though there was no one present to photograph her. "The things are upstairs," she said. The representative reminded her that the agreement required Brooke to remain nearby, but not interfere. Brooke nodded as if she were granting permission inside her own home. We passed the wall where the carbon monoxide alarm had hung. A lighter rectangle remained in the wallpaper. The empty space unsettled me more than the device had. Brooke had spent years filling the house with objects that told visitors what history should mean. Now the missing alarm told the only story she could not curate. The linen closet was locked. Brooke removed a key from her pocket and opened it without meeting my eyes. Piper's suitcase sat on the bottom shelf exactly as Elaine had described. The zipper pulls had been fastened together, with a small luggage lock that did not belong to us. "You locked a 14-year-old's clothes away for 3 days," I said. She was refusing to participate in anything. Every request became a battle. The representative photographed the suitcase before I touched it. Brooke provided the key to the luggage lock, and I opened the case. Everything I had packed was still folded inside. Piper's jeans, pajamas, clean underwear, winter socks, and the red sweater her father had bought during his last Christmas with us had not been worn. The small note I had tucked between the sweaters remained unopened. I pressed my fingers to the red fabric, then closed the lid halfway until I could breathe without shaking. Brooke watched me. The costume was only supposed to be for the tour. "Then why did you lock her real clothes away 3 days earlier?" She kept threatening to change and disappear upstairs when I needed help. Brooke still spoke as if Piper's body, clothes, and time had been event supplies she had failed to control. We found Piper's phone in a desk drawer in Brooke's office. The screen was unbroken. It powered on after I connected it to a charger. There was no secret recording, hidden confession, or final piece of evidence waiting inside it. The blurry photograph of the red tag had already been downloaded from the family cloud backup during the investigation. The phone proved one simple thing. Brooke had lied when she told me it was destroyed. The maid costume was folded across a chair in the storage room. Dried mud marked the apron and the black hem. One brown streak crossed the exact place that had covered Piper's shin. The representative asked whether I wanted it documented. I said yes. Then she asked whether I wanted to take it. "No," I said. Brooke folded her arms. "It is just a costume. Piper said it stays here." For the first time since I arrived, Brooke's composure slipped. "Dana." I accepted the plea. I completed the evaluation. I am doing everything they asked. You could tell people. This was a misunderstanding that became larger than it should have. A misunderstanding does not require a locked suitcase, a hidden phone, and an alarm without batteries. I made mistakes. You made choices. Brooke stepped closer, then stopped when the representative shifted between us. "I needed one night to go well," she said. "One evening where this house looked the way it was supposed to look. Piper fought me at every step. You did not need her to be crazy. You needed everyone else to believe she was." Brooke's face hardened. "She destroyed my future." The sentence settled the last question I had carried into the house. Brooke had completed counseling sessions, stood before a judge, lost her position, and heard witnesses describe Piper struggling to remain conscious. She still believed the injury was what happened to her reputation. There was nothing left to reconcile. I took Piper's suitcase and phone. The representative carried the red sweater separately so it would not be crushed. We left the costume on the chair, exactly where Piper wanted it. Brooke remained in the cold house behind us. When I reached home, Piper was waiting at the dining table. I set the suitcase down and gave her the phone first. She checked the screen, saw that it worked, then placed it aside without opening any messages. I unlocked the suitcase. Piper touched the red sweater and looked at the clothes still folded beneath it. "I thought you forgot what you packed. I forgot to ask why you weren't wearing it." She looked at me for a long moment, then began choosing what she wanted to keep. The red sweater stayed. So did her jeans, her sketchbook, and the note she had never received. A few items no longer felt like hers, and we placed them in a donation bag without turning the decision into a ceremony. When she finished, Piper lowered the lid. I placed my hand beside hers, and we closed the suitcase together. We were not preserving what had happened inside Harlan House. We were deciding what still belonged in our lives. By December 2026, Piper had returned to school full-time. She had also returned to correcting people, arguing with television commercials, and narrating strange things from the passenger seat. Her voice filling our apartment no longer irritated me. It reminded me that silence had once been forced on her. Recovery had not erased everything. Some days, a headache arrived after a crowded classroom. Rooms with sealed windows made her uneasy. If a heater clicked on in an unfamiliar building, her eyes automatically searched the walls for an alarm. Her counselor called those reactions understandable, not dramatic, and we treated them as information rather than defects. We had one rule now. If either of us believed something might be unsafe, we left the possible danger first, then we checked. Only after that did we argue about what it meant. The rule applied to small things too. Once, Piper smelled burning plastic, and we found an overheated charger behind the counter. Another concern proved harmless. Neither result changed the rule. She no longer had to earn the right to be taken seriously before we looked. Elaine changed more slowly. Her first apology arrived full of explanations, so Piper returned it. The second named what she had seen, admitted she chose comfort over questions, and asked for nothing in return. Piper kept that one. Their first meeting took place in August at a public library cafe. Piper chose the location, the time, and the chair closest to the exit. I sat at a nearby table where she could see me. Elaine did not touch her without permission or bring a gift large enough to become a debt. They spoke for 20 minutes. When Piper said she was ready to leave, my mother stood and thanked her for coming. It was only a beginning, and it belonged to Piper. Brooke never received one. Her probation and no-contact order continued. Harlan House passed inspection for private use, but not public events, and it never returned to the society's programs. Justice did not require me to keep watching her. One evening near the end of December, Piper sat at the kitchen table describing a school debate that had apparently become a constitutional crisis because someone moved her note cards. I was cooking pasta, while the kitchen exhaust fan ran above the stove. Our new combination smoke and carbon monoxide alarm had been installed in the hallway months earlier, along with separate units in both bedrooms. Piper was halfway through imitating her teacher when the alarm sounded. 4 sharp beeps cut through the apartment, followed by a pause. Then the sequence began again. My hand froze over the pot. For one careless fraction of a second, I almost said it was probably nothing. The kitchen fan was running, steam had reached the hallway, and the alarm was new. My mind began producing explanations before I had taken a single safe action. I stopped myself. Piper was already standing. She did not look panicked, but her face had gone still. "We check?" she asked. "We check," I said as I turned off the stove and the fan. I did not walk through the apartment searching for a source, remove the alarm, or open every window before anyone could measure the air. I took my phone and keys. Piper grabbed her coat from the chair, and we left by the stairwell without using the elevator. Outside, cold air struck my face. Piper stood beside me under the building awning while I called 911 and explained that a combination alarm had sounded in a repeating 4-beat pattern. I told the dispatcher there was no visible smoke, no known fire, and no one had symptoms. She instructed us to remain outside and wait for the fire department. We remained outside as instructed. The old version of me would have hated standing there. I would have measured the inconvenience in cooling pasta, curious neighbors, and the possibility of looking foolish when nothing was wrong. That night, I watched Piper breathe steadily and understood that embarrassment was not a safety standard. The fire crew arrived within minutes. They entered with meters while we stayed outside. One firefighter checked the hallway unit and the alarms in the bedrooms. Another inspected the gas stove, furnace closet, and adjoining apartments. Their meters found no carbon monoxide. There was no fire. The combination unit had developed a sensor fault and needed to be replaced. The firefighter brought it outside in a clear bag and explained that we had done the right thing by leaving instead of disabling it or assuming the warning was false. He gave me the incident number and told me not to reinstall the device. I thanked him. Piper thanked him too. When the truck left, we stood under the awning for another moment. Snow had begun falling in small, dry flakes, collecting in Piper's hair. "You are not mad?" she asked. "At you?" I asked, and Piper shook her head. "At the alarm, at going outside. Dinner is probably ruined. Being wrong about danger is cheaper than being right too late." Piper studied me, then smiled. "That sounds like something Regional Quality Control would put on a poster." "It is an excellent poster. It needs a picture of you holding burnt pasta." The pasta was soft when we returned, but not ruined. I replaced the alarm with the backup unit our building manager brought from storage, then scheduled a licensed technician to inspect the system the next morning. After that, Piper returned to her chair and resumed the school debate at the exact point where the alarm had interrupted her. She told me one classmate had accused her of hiding evidence because she placed a note card beneath a textbook. Another had objected to the phrase hiding evidence because everyone had watched her put it there. Piper reenacted the argument with 3 different voices and a level of detail that would once have tempted me to correct the sequence. I did not ask her to begin again. I did not stop her to determine whether the note card had been beneath the left side or the right side of the book. I listened to what she was trying to tell me, which was that she had spoken, people had disagreed, and no one had been allowed to erase her by calling her unreasonable. When she finished, she twirled pasta around her fork and said, "I won, by the way." "I assumed you did." "You should not assume. You should verify." I laughed. "Fair point." She leaned back in her chair, pleased with herself, and continued talking. I could not change the night Piper had lain beside Brooke's door, or promise that every future warning would be correct. I could promise she would never again have to become silent, before I became willing to check. Piper did not need a mother who always knew she was right. She needed one who would check before teaching her to doubt herself.